Well, welcome. I'm Jeff Ledermann. I'm the Environmental and Outdoor Education Coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Education. I am a former science teacher, but that was a long, long time ago, before all the new standards and all that stuff. But I moved over from the Pollution Control Agency about just over a year ago to integrate this project, trying to encourage schools to do more outdoor environmental education. Before that, I've been doing a combination of formal education coordination across the state, but also a lot of residential environmental ed. Working with citizens and the public. I started the Eco Experience at the Minnesota State Fair. Hopefully some of you got out there to see that exhibit and learned a lot about how to protect the environment. And we can talk a little bit about climate change, as I was one of the first to put together a climate change information and education sheet, worked with the DNR and the Pollution Control Agency and the Department of Commerce to have a state fact sheet on climate change, global warming, climate change in Minnesota, way back in 2000. So if you want to chat about that, we can. And doing a little bit of renewable energy stuff on the side too. So, but today I want to, you all come from a lot of different backgrounds, but I think we'll hopefully touch on things that will benefit each of you. I want to make the case for environmental and outdoor education, especially, I know in the last group, and I'm guessing in this group, we actually, you already mentioned now the challenges of trying to get this integrated into all the expectations you already have. So I want to help give you some research and background to help make that case for you so you feel empowered and you have permission from the Department of Education to teach environmental and outdoor education. I'm going to show you some resources, and if we have time, I think we'll have a little bit of time, I want to have some discussion about specific examples. We can talk about things that people have done that have worked, we can share with each other, and some things I'll share with you. So does that work for everybody? Okay. There's my contact information, but I think everybody got the flyer that I put on the table. Has my contact information on the front of it, and it summarizes some of the research, so you don't need to take a lot of notes because a lot of it is on this fact sheet, and then some of the resources are on the back page too. This is risky because you just had lunch, but I want each of you to just take a deep breath. Close your eyes, actually. And I'm going to take a moment to think and reflect. So everybody, if you would, close your eyes. I want you to think about your favorite place, some place that's special to you, either you've been or you might want to be at. But think of that special place. Focus on that for a little bit. Okay, you can open your eyes again. You don't want anybody falling asleep. Raise your hand if the place that you were thinking of was either outdoors or nature-based or something related to the environment and the outdoors. It looks like everybody. You don't have to, don't have to be the only one. But the majority, by far, if you ask people about that, they're going to come up with some place outdoors or based in the nature. To me, that's really indicative of how we are connected on many different levels with the outdoors and the environment, and why it's so important that we need to teach about this. We'll get into more specifics, but that's why I'm doing this, because I want people to be able to protect and know what they can do to preserve those places. And that in Minnesota is really a foundation of why we're doing this. Before we get into that, though, I want to go over some definitions. In the late 60s, early 70s, we had a lot of issues with pollution and environmental problems. People realized it, the government got involved, and we started doing things. A lot of the Clean Air Acts, all that stuff. First Earth Day in 1970. And at a world level, the United Nations also got people together to talk about it, these issues, how we're going to do something on an ongoing basis to educate people and make sure that they protect and become good stewards. So in 1975, a group of countries, representatives got together and created the Belgrade Charter. And we still are using that as kind of the foundation for education definition, environmental education definition. And you'll see in almost all definitions of environmental ed, those four components of knowledge, attitudes, skills, and behaviors. So a comprehensive EE program has those components with the goal of trying to get people to protect or make wise decisions when it comes to the environment. A couple of years ago, a group of folks, with the encouragement of a legislator who was really interested in outdoor recreation, outdoor education, got together, and we came up with a definition for outdoor education, and actually ended up becoming this project that I'm working on. But very similar in that it's happening outdoors, but it is experiential. and that outdoor education includes skills and nature connections. And outdoor rec has some of those same facets, and when I'm talking to folks, I really like to focus on that thing in the middle. As environmentalists or as hunters and anglers, we may not agree on some of the details of what we should do with our environment, but we all have in common that we have this resource we want to protect and it's valuable to us. So we focus on that stuff where it's overlapped, that we have those common goals, and we can all agree that that is something we need to work for, especially in Minnesota. We have a host of environmental and natural resources. Realizing that back in 1990, the legislature, Minnesota legislature actually passed a statute. This is still on the books, that we have goals in Minnesota. We want citizens to be environmentally literate. We want them to understand ecological systems and the cause and effect relationship between humans and their attitudes and behavior in the environment, and be able to identify responses and how to protect the environment and take good care of it. So back in those days, there was actually way more. Actually, part of this legislation, it was actually called the Environmental Ed Act of 1990, included a requirement that teachers had to teach environmental education. Now, a lot of that was rolled back with the reform of the mid-90s of education, but this still exists. This component still exists. And one of the things that came out of this our initial legislation was the creation of a state plan for environmental education. I got a couple of copies I'll pass around, but this is the current version. We've had 3 revisions of it. It's the green print for Minnesota, a state plan for environmental education. This is a great resource, so if you need justification, you need support for teaching these issues, this is a great document. Includes the goals in it, so it's a great thing to share with your leadership if you want to get the point across about the state values this and how important it is. Before we jump into the academic part of it, this knowledge of the importance of the environment and protecting it is where this all comes from. And the research shows, and I want to really stress that, the science behind it is that why it's important that students get outside and that people are exposed to the environment and natural resources is because it results in behaviors that protect the environment. So that handout that I gave you that's on your table cites some of this, but we do know that people participate in nature-based and outdoor activities as kids and even adults have more favorable attitudes about the environment and will engage in behaviors that protect it. And Louise Chawla is one of the leading researchers, and I have fact sheets. I'll pass these around too, but she's put together these compendiums of research that she's done and others have done that talk about the benefits of kids being outside and adults for that matter. So if you want to pass those around, take a look at them. She's got several different ones. You can go to her website, and I believe that actually some of her research, I cited her research on the fact sheet that you all got. But so if you go to her website, the University of Colorado at Denver, you can see some of that or get your own copies of it. And one of the additional things that her research has found is that getting experience outdoors helps build creativity, physical competence, social skills, environmental knowledge, confidence, and problem solving, among many other things. So we have the science that shows this is a really good thing. Unfortunately, it's not happening. And the good news is that people are realizing this on a broader scale. It's popular media, cartoon out of the paper, but we know it's a problem. And if you can't read that, it says a sign your kid needs more exposure to nature. The kid's asking what kind of batteries do they take. And if we get really into the research, we know that we have children, health is declining, and the facts are that children, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the major reasons that we can pinpoint this to probably is that students from 8 to 18 are spending 6.4 hours a day, 6.4 hours a day in front of a screen, compared to 30 minutes a week, 30 minutes a week outside in unstructured activity. So soccer doesn't count on that, but because they are outside maybe doing soccer a few hours a week or whatever, but doing unstructured, natural play, whatever, is only 30 minutes a week. I have to admit, and I hate to do this, but that is my daughter in that picture. I wanted to get a photo for this research, and I brought my camera out, and I was going to stage my daughters, because I thought I'd have to stage them to do this picture, but I didn't have to. She was doing her homework, and then she switched over to doing some other stuff, but she was sitting in front of the TV. So she's texting, ordering something, I think a soccer shorts off of the internet, and watching Glee one evening. And that, unfortunately, happens more often than I care to admit at my house. I mean, I do get them outside, but it's just an example of how much kids, how many distractions and how easy it is for them to be distracted by some of these things that are taking them away potentially from being outside. So what are the impacts of that? One of the resources that I'll talk a little bit later, but we've been doing, when it comes to environmental literacy, environmental knowledge in Minnesota, we've been doing a report, 3 times we've done this report over the last 10 years. What is Minnesota's knowledge of the outdoors and the environment and their concern and attitudes? And 38% of the adults in that survey, 1,000 Minnesota adults across the state, have below average level of knowledge about the environment. And if you were to grade that like you would in a classroom, only 8% of them received an A grade based on what they know about the environment. They were asked a bunch of questions. So we're not doing very well. Thankfully, Richard Louv, how many have read this book? Last Child in the Woods, subtitle Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. He coined that term based on his research, his work as a journalist on these issues, and realizing himself from his own experiences and his kids and other kids that we have this issue, this problem, the kids are not getting outside, and what are the consequences. So he gathered together a lot of research in this book in 2005. It's been a bestseller. And if you haven't read it, I really strongly encourage you. I've been doing this for 20 years. It really opened my eyes even more when I read this book. And it's great fodder, documentation, and evidence to share with your decision makers, people that you might want to convince that this is important to get kids outside. So definitely take a look at it and share it with those people that are helping you make those decisions and choices with your students. More research. Another benefit is that we know learning in the environment, getting outside, helps boost test scores. We are responsible for that, we're accountable for that in many cases in our classes. You can point to the fact that we have research that shows students will improve their achievement when they get instruction using the environment as an integrating context. Specific research, this book or this report called Closing the Achievement Gap, way back in 1998 actually. I cited it in the research hand on the fact sheet by Gerald Ledermann and Linda Hootie from California. They actually have done updates to this, but back in the 90s they went around and visited, I think it was like 20 schools or more around the country. They had controls and other schools that have integrated context, or environment as integrated context in their learning, and documented these improvements in test scores. I'd encourage you to look this up, get that research, and share that also with your decision makers. In addition to the standardized test measurements results that showed improvement, they also showed fostering creative, cooperative learning and civic responsibility. So again, the science is showing how important and how valuable this is. Given all that background, about 2 years ago, the Department of Education, I mentioned the Department of Natural Resources, we had done this outdoor education work group, and what came out of that was the need to, we determined what some of the barriers were and what incentives could be put in place, and the money, of course, support helps. And so we actually applied, the department did, and the Department of Natural Resources, to the lottery money, the Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources that distributes money from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the lottery money, to projects to help improve the environment. We got money to fund my position for 2 years, or just a little over 2 years. Enough money for 6 schools to participate in a big way with some pilot resources, a little bit of money for them to actually get resources to do a project related to taking kids outside or integrating the environment, and then intensive training. The pictures there are from last December, which happened to be the coldest day of the winter, but December 8th and 9th up at Camp Courage, and we did 2 full days of trying to do what we're talking about here in a big way and give them lots of examples and support across all disciplines in their school and get enough quantity of mass that they were to actually be supported and be able to do this in a big way across their school. So we've only been doing it for the last part of the last year. When they started actually implementing stuff after the first training, and then they'll be doing it throughout this next school year. And we have Did have money in there for evaluator, working with Julie Ernst at the University of Minnesota Duluth, who's really a well-known, another one of those researchers that's collecting a lot of this data that's showing the value of these type of programs. And even after a few months, she's found that students and the teachers showed their academic engagement improved for the students, and then for the teachers also, their environmental sensitivity and the students, and their understanding of ecological systems went up just even this short period of time that we've been doing this. So hopefully at the end of the project we'll even have more documentation that we can go to the decision makers, and you can use some of this to go to your decision makers to show that this is a good way of teaching and something we need to do in a bigger way. I've talked a little bit about some of these, but again, the academic benefits are really immense. It's real world, hands-on, kids can experience, see it, live it. So it's got the benefits of having that through environmental and outdoor education. Interdisciplinary, the department, in your schools, I know, teacher preparation projects, trying to get more interdisciplinary type activities. There's a lot of benefits associated with that. And this environment is a great theme or a topic or context to make that work. Students are more engaged. They're involved. They're getting outside where it's natural for them to be, and they're seeing new experiences, and attendance goes up. I mentioned Richard Louv. His group is called the Children of Nature Network. So he's continuing his work after his book. It's a great resource, childrenofnature.org. I think I also have that one on the fact sheet. Check it out. They've got large compendiums of research. They've got resources for teachers and families, how to get students outside. Wealth of knowledge and information out there is definitely one of the most valuable resources. I didn't pass this around. I'll pass this around to the Closing the Achievement Gap book. And pass the book around too. So yeah, check that one out if you haven't. This type of program creates healthier students. We all know there's a lot of issues related with student obesity. Physical activity has decreased dramatically over the last few years, or students' activity levels and health levels have decreased. How many are familiar with SHIP grants, the statewide health improvement program? Anybody know about that? The Minnesota Department of Health, the Department of Education, and I think maybe another agency are helping distribute funding. I think it's federal money that goes out to counties through the state to get students more active. I've been talking to my colleague at the department who does that program, and those are the outcomes that they want, or they achieve through this program. Focused students, enhanced academics. Having active students gives you fewer classroom disruptions, and it's a learning style that many kids are more attuned with. And it's fun. So they are now supporting the idea of environmental and outdoor education as part of that project or program. So if you have a county who receives SHIP funds, I mean, they've been being used for playground equipment and that kind of thing, but if you have one, you can actually use some of that money for outdoor environmental education projects. So they're starting to realize that there's a mutual benefit. So check that out if you're in one of those counties, because we're achieving the same outcomes. This, by the way, and this previous picture, were taken as a good example of how this can work. For 10 years, I've been working with our local school district where my kids go to try and get the teachers to take their kids outside more often and integrate into more environmental education. This is a 3rd through 5th grade school. I got myself on the curriculum committee. We actually went through the whole science curriculum, and we identified areas where you could add these lessons for environmental, take kids outside instead of teaching it in the classroom. And I couldn't get the teachers really. There was one science teacher that was really active, but I couldn't get a lot of the teachers to do anything. I finally realized that there were these barriers that were keeping teachers from doing it, and the students hadn't had a lot of experience with it, but we could address some of those pretty easily by having the kids build a perimeter around one of our woods areas. We have 11 acres, some beautiful prairie and pine trees, and then we have these oak trees right off of the ball fields. And before and after school, if you haven't worked with community ed or daycare situation before and after school or summer school daycare, there was a great opportunity because it was right at that school. And those kids they don't have some of the structure that is required of the academic teachers so that we had flexibility to take kids out there. Instead of playing on the ball fields, we took them back in the woods. I had some of the older kids cut out buckthorn, because there's a lot of buckthorn in this area, it's about a half an acre, and use that to build the perimeter. And we had leftover logs and branches laying around from when we did horse logging. And now all of a sudden, that addressed one of the big fears the teachers had, is that the kids are going to run off or they couldn't see them. So, and we started with these before and after school kids. And lo and behold, you can see they're having a lot of fun. They're really enjoying the opportunity to be out there. They're building forts, making teeter-totters. They're being active, and it's giving a lot of benefits. And I know these kids are going to go back now this fall. This summer, they're doing it on a regular basis. They're going to go to their teachers and say, recess is right there, is right back here on this field. Why can't we go and play in the woods? And which actually, they came up with their own name. They call it the Outback. So I solicited them how you want to, because it's really important to have that sense of place and have that terminology. And so we're all in agreement. We're going to go play in the Outback, and the teachers know where it is, the students know where it is, and it's got this barrier, this perimeter. So it's kind of a build it and they will come type of deal. But for 10 years, I couldn't figure out how to make that next leap, and by having that site and getting the kids gradually involved, it's really paid off. Other benefits from this work. You heard about some of the issues related to global warming and the emissions and how we're going to need to change our energy systems. Those are going to relate in new jobs, the new green economy. So kids we're going to need people to be able to do wind power and solar power, and I think you heard a little about how the issues related to flooding. We have 100-year floods every few years, so we need to know how to manage our water when we have those storms to get it infiltrated or to manage runoff. So kids are going to need to be able to do that, and having this kind of experience in high school and even elementary is going to prepare them better to be able to do that. And the big one for schools, I'm sure you hear this all the time, doing environmental education or integrating environmental issues and real-world examples in their school can save them money. I coordinate the Green Ribbon Schools program, which is a U.S. Department of Education program, just started last year. Last year was the first pilot year. The state departments were responsible for implementing the project, and we solicited applications, and then they were recognized for achieving towards green buildings. That's, reducing energy, building with green components, renewable stuff, and renewable energy, health and safety, their policies, using cleaners that aren't very toxic, getting kids outside, having policies associated with asthma, et cetera. And then lastly, the third pillar is environmental education. So making sure students are learning about the environment and sustainability. So we have schools that are doing a great job with that, but we're trying to encourage a lot more. We had 16 applications last year. I hope to get at least twice that many this coming year. We can only nominate 3 schools to the national level, but we did recognize the finalists that we had this year, 7 finalists. 3 schools received out of 78 schools national-wide. 3 of them in Minnesota received this National Green Ribbon Schools Award. It was Garlow Environmental Magnet School in West St. Paul. It was an elementary school. And North Shore Community School is a charter school up in Duluth. And Kennedy Community School in St. Joseph, which is in the St. Cloud district. So if you are interested in this program, we'd love to have you apply, document that is a valuable program, and actually to help get the word out to schools and to your colleagues, because the process of applying is a really benefit schools, because they might be doing really good in environmental ed, but your school may not be doing great when it comes to saving energy, for example. So through the application, there are a lot of resources that your administrators, your janitors, the engineers can link to and find resources to help make steps to improve what they might be doing or how to reduce their impact environmentally. So check that out. We'll be announcing again the application in the fall, and accepting applications probably be due sometime early winter, and then the U.S. Department will announce them next spring. Yep.
What are some of the criteria that you guys look for when you give these awards out?
So there's about 10 subcategories and criteria that we give points in about 25 different areas. It's very comprehensive, but those are the 3 main categories.
Okay.
So energy conservation is really big. You get extra points if you're doing renewable energy. Green cleaning, making sure kids are getting outside, they have recess time, that kind of stuff. Those are part of the health and safety. And then environmental education is, do you teach environmental AP Environmental Science? Do you offer environmental studies through all grade levels? Do each subject matter touch on sustainability issues? And so the more you do, the more points you're able to get. So, but those are the three main categories. Oh, the money part. That girl is one of the C Squad members at one, I believe they're in the Northeast Metro School, that students have played an active role because a lot of the energy saving is related to behaviors and reducing their impact through our choices at school by students and by staff. So she's putting up a sign that says, remember, turn off the lights. I had a light switch in her school, and students that have been involved in these projects have made a major difference in reducing their energy usage because of the reminders and bugging the staff and bugging their peers to reduce their energy use. The school that my kids go to has reduced an average of $50,000 a year just through most of the behavior changes, getting the lights off, getting the computer shut down. They've saved over $500,000 in about 7 or 8 years, I think it is. So the savings, the financial, are really significant. And the other thing that was really interesting about the Green Ribbon Schools program is that we had to nominate at least one school that came from students that has a high percentage of students with disadvantaged backgrounds, which was determined to be 40% or more free and reduced lunches. And I don't know if this is a comment about the sorry status of our economy and people's well-being, but over half of our applicants qualified for that designation. And nationally, half of the award winners qualified for that designation. So, but I think it's more a reflection that schools that are in that situation, they are really looking for opportunities to save money, to work with communities, and community partnerships and working with local organizations helps you in many of these areas because it's a real world and you can talk about environmental issues. And so schools that are in a situation where they have a lot of poverty or students that are struggling, there are a lot of benefits for doing environmental and outdoor education because it's real world, it's hand-on, and there's the money saving. So to me, it showed that it's a good thing for all types of situations, all types of schools. And the other thing we haven't really touched much on here as we wrap up some of the research is it's not just science. I know a lot of you are in science, although I've mentioned a couple math teachers and other special ed and others, but environmental education or taking kids outside can be applied or done across the whole spectrum of the academics. And I want to stress that, in education and quality learning, quality teaching, we have content, we have standards. I think most of you are really familiar with that. That's really important to good learning. We have instruction. We need high quality instruction. Teachers are really important, and having good instruction is critical in students achieving. And assessment is a part of that, so we know what we're measuring. But the fourth area that the department doesn't spend a lot of time on, but I think really applies in this case, is the learning environment. And there are other factors outside the classroom that affect that, but we can really change that through environmental and outdoor education, getting kids outside of the four walls and getting them outside. And it really changes attitudes and changes a lot more, and engagement and all the other things that we've talked about. So I don't want you to think about this is requiring you to add anything. And we will spend the rest of the time here. I want to talk about some examples of how we can do that and discuss maybe challenges that some of you have run into and how we can get around those. But it's not adding anything, it's adapting or replacing what you're already teaching. If you're teaching, I'll never forget, I was working with this school that I was on the curriculum committee, and we had a lesson in their book because they determined their standards, determined the curriculum we're going to cover in each grade level, scope and sequence, and they got their book. And their book for 4th grade, living and non-living organisms, was a lesson that kids were supposed to go back to their table, grab a beaker of peas and a beaker of pea rock, and then do a compare and contrast about living and non-living organisms. A perfect, easy example of going outside, especially when you have what they have out their door, 11 acres, prairie, woods, pine trees. There are all kinds of ways you can teach about living and non-living organisms outside. The real thing, well, peas are real, I guess, but in a beaker on a table. So there are lots of ways, examples of that can be done. And it does take a little bit of time, get your kids together, get them out, get the right clothing, etc. But they get better at that. It's building those skills. It does take time. You'll get more comfortable. There are a lot of things. We can talk a lot about some of those ways to do that. But I really encourage you to think about it in the means of not adding, but you're replacing, or you're doing things differently in a different location, a different learning environment, or a different theme. So that's all that I had from a research standpoint. Oh, I did want to feature a couple of resources. Unless someone had any questions before we jump into that. So one-stop shopping for environmental education in Minnesota is SEEK, and that's on the pencil that I handed out, and it's also on the fact sheet. seek.state.mn.us. This is the homepage. There are over 120 partners in Minnesota that are ranged from nature centers to government agencies to other organizations, nonprofits that provide environmental ed resources. You can search here. One of the most valuable, powerful tools on it. There's all kinds of things, news, jobs, calendar, but you can actually search by resources by going through and looking up by topic, or if you want to search by audience, say you teach pre-K through 6, or you can divide it up by 7 through 9, or if there's a specific issue you want to work on. There are all kinds of, we've been talking a little about, let's see, climatology, 44 just from clicking on that topic area related to climate. So each of them have their own abstract of ADA. Some people were asking about money, actually helped fund some of this workshop here today. This is an example of the resources, and you can get a full information about it and link directly to their program. So it's a really helpful, useful resource if you're not familiar with it. Who's used SEEK before? Anyone used SEEK before? Okay, some of you have heard of it, good. Within SEEK also, you can, if you want to search by region, you can go to a different part of the state and see what those resources, what's available in your community. I mentioned the calendar before. I talked a little bit about the green print, the literacy survey. There's a link here to that if you want to see the specifics about that. We have a literacy scope and sequence, although it's getting a little bit old. It's from 2003, but that's another great, if you're starting from the ground up and you're building an environmental ed program in your school, it'd be a great resource for you. And I mentioned the green print. So there's some other of those materials, they're resources that we talked about earlier. Okay, so that's SEEK. Any questions about that? Yeah.
I have a question about, I knew about the environmental standards that we placed in the state of Minnesota, but now since they kind of revamped everything, I don't really see them in science in 9 through 12. And they are implied in some of the engineering standards. Where are the environmental standards? Are they more in the elementary level?
In ecosystems or ecology, there's a lot in natural science and biology, in the biological sciences. In fact, and they're tested. Ecosystems is tested pretty heavily in biology. But where I think the biggest connection is in all of the, whether it's physical science, life science, or earth science, there is a whole substrand that's human interaction in the environment. So really almost any of these things related to environmental education could be taught within that area. But one of the things I would do, and we can talk some more about this in a little bit, is if you have a topic or a content area, think about, as I was saying before, how can you take that outside? Or what's a thing in your community or an issue related to the environment or your building that you can get that concept, that benchmark achieved through that. And let's throw out some more ideas and we can talk about that in a little bit. One more resource. My daughter had the opportunity to go to Conserve School, which is a semester school, 17 weeks for juniors in high school in northeastern Wisconsin. It's in Wisconsin, not Minnesota. But they do a better job of any school I've seen about especially integrating multiple content areas with this stuff we're talking about, integrating environmental issues and taking outside. They spend over half the day outside, and it's focused on environmental education and environmental studies and building stewardship for the environment. And I just want to highlight there, I'll get to call it up, but you had a question? Yeah, I'll call it up. It's Conserve School, here we go, conserveschool.org. And I'm gonna play this video. It's only 3 minutes. I'll give my voice a chance to rest. But it gives you an overview of the school.
I love being interactive with teachers, and here we're friends with teachers. You kind of want to be learning. It's not so much forced upon you.
There's so much we can learn from our environment outside that we can't see or understand from indoors.
At Conserve School, students do a wide range of activities, but they're all focused on the same priority. One is to develop their love of nature and their comfortableness out in the outdoors, and the second is to have a great academic experience to move them forward.
Everyone's so open and ready to help each other out, and it's really nice to have that kind of support.
Here we're outside, we're doing something, or we're participating in discussions, so I actually learn here. And I'm having fun while I'm doing it, so I'm not really realizing I'm learning.
At Conserve School, the teachers set up the assignments that give the students more ownership for their learning, and so they're given projects but with a little bit broader guidelines.
We're a really tight-knit group now because we're always relying on each other to help with the homework, and we really learn as much from each other as from the teacher.
We went out in thigh-high wading boots and surveyed with nets and went around looking for stuff in the muck. We came back with these trays and went through it and looked for different types of macroinvertebrates. It was really cool to see them alive and being able to actually be the ones that caught them.
There's just a lot more opportunities that we have, going backpacking for a week in the Porcupine Mountains. I've never been backpacking, and my school at home doesn't have the money or supplies to do it.
Here, everybody knows each other. It's a community where you're just friends with everybody. You get to learn about everybody, different walks of life, different places in the U.S. It's a really amazing place to come and learn.
This is an exceptional place with exceptional people, and I can't imagine being happier anywhere else.
There's no way of describing this school to its full potential. It's pretty much an understatement saying this place is amazing.
Through Jim's generosity, we're able to offer this experience to students for only $200, over $15,000 value, because we know that we'll be able to find the right students who will take this experience and live it forward in their lives to become meaningful environmental stewards who can help sustain not only the Northwoods of Wisconsin, but to make this world a better place.
It's okay to teach your passion because that's what you're excited about, and you can tie that to reading or to science or to getting outdoors. So keep that passion, keep working at it. If we can help, let me know. Thanks for coming today, and good luck.